Oh, hi, Charlie. So lovely to see you.
Hello,
Hi.
right.
Yay. This is a nice spot.
Yeah,
right?
sunny day. Take advantage of the outside.
Old Joe. Is it Old Joe?
It is Old Joe.
I used to call it Big Joe because of Big Ben.
That makes more sense.
Thank you so much for joining me, Charlie. So what did you order from the Bramall Cafe?
I got a hot chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Bramall hot chocolates are just like kind of what keeps me going. I'm not a coffee person, so when you need sugar, hot chocolate is the go-to. I've tried the white hot chocolate. It'd be too sugary, but you want the edge. My name is Charlie Clark. I'm a postgraduate researcher at the University of Birmingham. I'm currently doing a project on music cognition and ADHD. I'm from Northamptonshire, Toaster, if you know, you know.
What is this thing about the toaster?
So toaster is spelled Towcester, as in Towcester.
Okay.
But because our place names are weird and they're ancient, it's pronounced toaster. And every time anyone hears toaster, they automatically think of the thing that makes bread. I think there was a Minutemen video a few years ago where everybody I knew basically messaged me being like, "Hey, look, your town was mentioned on this video."
There's other towns. Worcester. For context, I had asked Charlie to be on the vlog because I was really fascinated by your research, ADHD and music, and I think it was during one of those writing sessions where we first met.
It was a study session.
I remember you mentioned music and ADHD, and I was like, oh, that's me. I guess we'll start from the beginning. Like, how do you identify as neurodiverse?
I'm 96% sure I have ADHD, 60% sure I'm autistic, or rather autistic people seem to identify me as autistic. Mm-hmm. And I am 100% sure that I have a tic / Tourette's disorder. The NHS is terrible. Mm-hmm. It's not terrible. No, we love it. We love the NHS. For mental health and neurodevelopmental conditions that are diagnosed late, it can be extremely slow and very arduous process of referrals getting lost, waiting in queues that are very, very long because everything is underfunded. Because I don't want to mislead people and be like, oh yes, I'm 100% doctor confirmed, but at the same time I have to live my life and I have to find the ways that work for me.
Around what time frame did you kind of get an inkling?
18, and I had my first undergraduate year to come to uni. I found particularly challenging. I went searching for answers effectively of like the organizational strategies and tips, you know, for just managing life and managing overwhelm just seemed to be working. Like the idea of like creating a timetable for your life and, you know, getting organized. I just couldn't work out why it was so hard. Eventually found the channel How to ADHD.
I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And I thought, oh, these ADHD tips are good. You know, I'll use these. They probably work for normal people as well. I would go basically to this channel and be like, help. It kind of spoke to my experience just so much better than any other advice I'd ever been given. I've had referrals lost more than once.
What?
Yeah. Getting a diagnosis has been quite a long time in the making.
Thank you for sharing. Depending on the person, like sharing the experience is like very personal. Yeah. Do you feel like the NHS or the medical system, they treat ADHD as this thing that's like,
I never want to be like rude about doctors because I think they're all operating in a system that's set up in a certain way and that limits their options and, you know, frames what they're able to do. I think it's a long-standing issue with disability in general that doctors aren't necessarily good at conditions that are long-term and don't necessarily have a cure to them. Yes, sometimes a doctor can provide a diagnosis, but then that diagnosis isn't necessarily going to lead anywhere because we've hit the limits of what people can do medically. The number of times I've been bounced off anxiety and depression services because that's the sort of thing of like, well, a diagnosis is going to take you 12 weeks at least, but I can refer you to the anxiety and depression people today. That's what you're here for ultimately, you know, it's because this thing is making you depressed. So diagnosis, that's an aside. You go through that a few times and you're like, well, actually, no, the diagnosis is not an aside. Having the diagnosis itself would actually be much more useful in just everyday living. Doctors tend to underestimate having language to explain what's going on with you is valid in and of itself, even if there isn't necessarily a cure. And I think I've got, kind of bumped into that with doctors a few times of like, we've both been, sat there and been like, well, what do we do? I think high functioning people, in big scare quotes, they tend to get missed by doctors a bit more because you've missed your window of intervention. You've missed the window of, where they can do things about it. They care less, I think.
Because I was late diagnosed, a lot of people in my life were like, oh, but you don't seem like you have ADHD and you've lived this long with that. So they kind of either don't believe it or they're like, you don't need diagnosis.
Yes.
And I'm just like, well, no, it is helpful.
It is really helpful. And it's really hard to explain that to how it's helpful to a doctor in a medical setting. It creates a barrier, I think. With ADHD specifically, when you're being asked to follow up on referrals that happened weeks ago, or being asked to wait for things, you forget appointment times that you made months ago, and then you're expecting somebody is more likely to have executive functioning difficulties to remember that appointment. It does seem specifically designed to underdiagnose people through neglect.
Here in the UK, the wait list to get diagnosed is like 7 years.
It depends what area you're in. I was living in Sheffield before Birmingham to do my master's degree. I was told at the time that the wait would be 2 years. A few weeks later, was watching the news, and Sheffield was specifically mentioned for getting through ADHD diagnoses so slowly, it would have taken them 2,000 years to get through the waiting list. Waiting lists are a specific thing that somebody enters on and get centrally managed. But there doesn't seem to be like an actual official waiting list for things like ADHD.
Weird.
And so when you move, it's kind of like, well, what happens to your referral? Getting an ADHD diagnosis right now is very difficult. But if you are looking for one, I would strongly recommend investigating the right to choose. ADHD UK's website basically allows you to choose a private provider. You can ask your GP to refer you to if the wait list is too long. ADHD UK, they know more than me.
Because you mentioned you think you may have ADHD, autism, and Tourette's.
Yes.
How do they all kind of interact with each other?
It is hard to understand where one ends and one begins sometimes. I'm in a very neurodivergent household, and other people will stim. Stim is it's short for like self-stimulatory behavior, which I was doing it with my hair earlier. It's things like fidgeting, but also like rocking back and forth is a classic one, and it's typically associated with autism. And so when you verbal stims, it's a way of self-soothing, dismissed as me riffing off other people's stims, of like someone would make a strange noise, you make a strange noise back, it's obvious. But over the course of lockdown, it became increasingly obvious that I didn't have any control over some of the noises I was making, and it's gradually gotten worse. They wax and wane in different scenarios, but ultimately I don't have any control. And it used to be, okay, I just did this weird thing at home, and now it's like, I can't stop myself from doing this in meetings with important people. What started off as people interpret it as kind of a stim versus a fidget versus a tic, they all kind of blend into one another. My sister is doing her own PhD in disability and reproductive technologies. She's the philosophy side of that. And it's sort of like well-defined diagnostic traits that clinicians use to diagnose somebody when you think about them, to the extent when you have them and they're a part of your life. The kind of boundaries around them feel a lot more blurry. You're trying to work out how to narrativize it yourself.
Is it through the family?
There is a genetic link. I don't want to speak too much on that area of research because it's not necessarily my expertise.
When I was diagnosed, it came as like a bit of a shock to me. It makes sense now looking back and learning more about myself. I'm like, oh, I thought everyone did that or everyone dealt with that. It got me thinking about unique challenges and how we approach like the whole system of being a PhD student.
I have quite a complicated relationship with it because on the one hand, there are definitely ways in which being a neurodivergent, the system is not particularly designed for neurodivergent people. There are definitely criticisms, especially in the way that we treat deadlines in universities that I think are actively hostile to ADHD is universities can afford to be a little bit more sympathetic or a bit more proactive in helping ADHDers with that aspect of it. Before I was a PGR, I was working a full-time job that had regular hours. I couldn't manage my own time. It was half-hour lunch breaks. I had to be working and I had to be doing it in a certain way at this specific time. I was just exhausted, absolutely exhausted. Yes, I was turning up to work and doing my job, but I wasn't doing anything else. Like the time that I did have, I was spending recovering. Moving from there to being in a PGR, I'm still working. It's not necessarily about the amount of time I'm working, but I have so much more freedom to be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling today, so therefore this type of work is more appropriate. And actually that's a much more sustainable way of working for me and my brain. As my undergrad demonstrated to myself, you can't just necessarily throw a neurodivergent researcher into manage your own time completely efficiently and it will work out for you. Right. No, you do have to do that. But once you have that self-knowledge, actually the flexibility of academia can actually work in the favor of a lot of neurodivergent people, I think. And also, you know, it's we have hyperfocuses and special interests if you're of the ADHD variety, and you get to go study them. And then if you're bored of studying what you're studying, you get to go dive into somebody else's research. It's nice. My last job, it was very much the same every single day. Whereas now, like every week is different. I've got different things in my calendar. It's less soul destroying.
We don't want soul destroying. What would you say is some like helpful routines?
Do I have a routine? I have a routine. I go running in the morning. That's my routine. One of the things that I've been kind of thinking about a lot recently is transition times. If I can get myself to go for the run, and I really want to emphasize, it is not as simple as waking up at a certain time every day and just doing it. I wake up and the first thing I do is go for a run, even if it takes me 2 hours to get to that point. Having achieved something in the day that you can just tick off and just be like, that gets me into actually working and getting me out of that kind of paralysis. I have the place that I go for lunch, kind of like points of stability to organize my day around helps.
With exercise, it's important. And I'm terrible at that.
Like, take all of this with a pinch of salt of like, you know, because when we talk about our routines, I think sometimes we can make it all sound wonderful and like we've solved everything and, you know, this thing works 100% of the time. What happens is I don't go running for 2 weeks and then I'll change something about the run. I'll try go somewhere else. Or just because something that used to work isn't working anymore, that doesn't mean you've necessarily failed. It just means you need to try something new.
You keep moving forward regardless of what happens. In addition to you like doing your own PhD degree, you're a PGR postgraduate researcher representative.
It's been really nice to like get to know the university and the decision making that goes on at the university. The role that I have, it means I get to sit in quite a lot of meetings if I want to. It's nice to be able to like pitch in with what the student voice is and bring those issues into those meetings, which, you know, otherwise would not, you know, would go overlooked. On this campus, sometimes students are a little bit reticent to give feedback, or they just don't know it's there. And so like for me, it's very much encouraging people to be like, give me the feedback, tell me tell me and I will bring it to people.
Oh, I imagine every university has like its systemic issues.
I can see systemic issues. The people should just be more proactive when it comes to their neurodivergent students. Particularly, I would say, like the autistic and ADHD variety. When you have a student come to you who is experiencing a difficulty, they don't necessarily have as much capacity to advocate for themselves. Not necessarily because they're less competent, but just because, you know, the mixture of their neurodivergent traits and the stressful situation that they're currently going through means that they're probably finding it really hard. One of the things that I come across quite a lot, when you go to somebody to help you, they will signpost you to a million different links of varying usefulness. And then it's left to you to sort out, oh gosh, where do I go next? It can be like, well, I'm just totally overwhelmed. I'm just going to shut down and not deal with this. I have heard neurodivergent people in the past, again, not University of Birmingham specific, of having a reasonable adjustment plan in place, and then one department honouring it and another department that they were part of not honouring it, then not having the capacity to challenge the department who hadn't honoured it. When you're trying to navigate the bureaucracy of big institutions, is harder for neurodivergent people as a part of their neurodivergence, and takes a greater toll. Universities don't necessarily always realise that, or it isn't written into their policies to be like, if you're giving a no to somebody, it should be somebody's job to be like, but we still have obligations to you to make sure that you are okay. My advice to anyone working with neurodivergent people is to be proactive, be curious, and empathetic. My specific one, which is for universities in general, stop penalising people for missing deadlines.
Oh, yeah.
If somebody has a diagnosis of ADHD, I think that there should be some wavering of point penalties for deadlines. Also, last minute things like your computer crashing should be counted as for an extension. The psychology of deadlines for an ADHDer, in particular, is that you're not going to be able to get it done a week in advance. Everybody always says, get it done a week in advance, and then if something happens last minute, then you'll be fine, won't you? And that just completely doesn't account for the fact that somebody with ADHD doesn't plan like that and cannot plan like that.
Right.
Like, they will be working up until the deadline, because the deadline is the motivating factor. That is something universities could investigate and look at and update their policy around to be more inclusive of ADHD students.
That makes me think of a conversation that I had with one of my friends where in regard to being proactive towards neurodivergent students. And he said the problem that he's observing well-being support, they're kind of structured towards like neurotypical people. And, well, if they would adjust their systems to suit neurodivergent people, it would benefit everyone. But at this point, it's only benefiting greater portion.
A lot of the admin systems kind of embed certain norms around productivity, and also kind of values around everyone being, their own self-organized, well-disciplined individual.
I'm glad that you emphasize the importance of like empathy, because you would think it would be the first thing people would go towards, but it's often not, sadly.
Realizing how that people are thinking within their job role. My previous job was a teaching assistant, special educational needs. Finding myself making decisions where I'm taking the scope of my job into account. I think that's the systemic issue that is, difficult to fight on your own as an individual. But I also think as individuals, we can acknowledge that and still display the empathy. Take that time to make sure that a person who has come to us for help gets sent off in the right direction, at least afterwards, rather than just throwing a list of links and phone numbers to somebody.
Or in some cases, they don't help you at all and say they can't do anything, and you're off to fend for yourself. Thank you so much, Charlie, for this really informative conversation. I really enjoyed it. We are reaching the end, sadly.
Yes.
So do you have any last thoughts to share with us?
Remembering to choose empathy. Yeah.
Choose empathy.
Choose
That's
empathy.
A sticker right there.
Yeah.
That's a slogan.
Yeah.
Charlie 2025.
Choose empathy. If somebody wants to take that and actually build policy on it, in a way that unites the left to maybe take on a rising fascist society, choose empathy.
Where can people find you on social media or online?
If people really want to talk to me about me and my research, to look up my student profile on the Midlands for Cities website. That's my funding body, my doctoral training partnership. I have a profile on there that's got an email address on it and a summary of my research if you're interested. Yes, I do work about ADHD in music cognition, and I'm trying to use more participatory action methods, which basically means that I get actual ADHD musicians involved in a bit of the research design and some of the interpretation of the results to kind of inform inform the research, rather than just me with my, you know, Schrodinger's ADHD status, interpreting things on my own. I'm on LinkedIn.
I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I know you have like plans and stuff.
Yes.
So.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh.
Yeah.
This was in the conversation before. A lot of academics play Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a good game. It's fun. I think it's still very cognitive, if that makes sense, of like, it really gets your head out of it. You have to think about so many things, and it's the only way you can stop thinking about research is to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's the treatment for academia.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.